The tragic life and end of the Spinners members. This is sad. What if I told you that behind the smooth suits, golden harmonies, and glittering stage lights of one of soul music's greatest groups lies a hidden file of tragedies so devastating even their fans never knew the full story? The Spinners. Those velvet-voiced legends who gave us timeless hits like I'll Be Around and Could It Be I'm Falling in Love were once celebrated as the soundtrack of love and joy. But offstage, their lives tell a darker tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and untimely death. This isn't just another music story. This is the secret archive of the Spinners, a confidential case file that reads more like a tragedy than a celebration. Members vanished from the spotlight without explanation. Families torn apart by unthinkable loss and shocking deaths that left fans reeling. You think you know their music, but do you know the price they paid for that fame? The documents are there, scattered in interviews, public records, and whispers from those who were closest to the group. According to insiders, egos clashed, and money disputes fractured friendships that once seemed unbreakable. Court filings reveal bitter royalty battles, while heartbreaking obituaries confirm the cruel way life snatched away some of their brightest stars. The tragedy wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The story of Philippe Wynne, for example, isn't just about a lead singer leaving a band. It's about a man collapsing on stage at only 43 after years of private struggles. That's not just history. It's a haunting reminder of the danger fame can hide. And then there are the parts the public rarely hears about: the confusing credit disputes over who really sang lead, the silent battles with illness that forced members off stage, and the devastating family tragedies like the violent death of a son or the drowning of another that left survivors with wounds far deeper than any broken contract. These aren't rumors. They're real, documented heartbreaks that show how fragile even the strongest voices can be. Some call it bad luck. Others insist it's the curse of fame, that the very industry that made the Spinners immortal also pushed them into an endless spiral of exhaustion, disputes, and grief. Whatever the truth, the pattern is undeniable. One by one, the members who brought joy to millions were consumed by private darkness. So tonight we're opening the vault, unsealing the hidden case file of the Spinners. We'll follow the timeline from their rise out of Detroit's Herman Gardens to their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nearly 7 decades later. But along the way, we'll uncover the shocking, little-known tragedies that defined their lives. By the end, you'll have to ask yourself, was their downfall simply cruel fate, or was it the inevitable cost of stardom in an unforgiving industry? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may forever change the way you remember the Spinners. Before we dive into the heartbreaking journey of the Spinners, let me make you a promise. This video is not just a list of dates or headlines. It's a deeper look into the men behind the music, their rise to glory, and the shocking, often tragic turns their lives would take. You will walk away with not only a better understanding of their success, but also the pain, struggles, and private battles that too often remain hidden behind the stage lights. But with that promise comes a responsibility. Everything we share here is based on publicly available information, archived interviews, obituaries, verified news articles, and historical records. Some accounts involve personal testimonies or allegations from people close to the band. When that's the case, we'll let you know, because while rumors have long swirled around the group, our purpose is not to sensationalize. Our purpose is to paint as accurate a picture as possible while respecting both the living and the memory of those who have passed. Why is this important? Because the Spinners were more than just entertainers. They were fathers, brothers, husbands, and friends. Their story deserves to be told with honesty, care, and accountability. That means acknowledging their triumphs without ignoring their flaws, and exploring their tragedies without exploiting their pain. Think of this as opening a historical case file. The facts are drawn from reliable sources. The context is explained, and where uncertainty exists, we highlight it rather than hide it. So, what exactly will we uncover? We'll trace their path from humble beginnings in Detroit's Herman Gardens housing project to the glittering heights of Atlantic Records. We'll revisit the years when their songs dominated the charts and made them household names. But we'll also expose the struggles that came later. Disputes over money, health battles that silenced their voices, and devastating personal losses that shook them to the core. The truth is, the Spinners' story is not one of endless success. It's one of survival against the odds and of heartbreaking endings that remind us how fragile even the most legendary careers can be. Along the way, we'll hear about Bobby Smith's quiet battle with cancer, Billy Henderson's fight over royalties, Purvis Jackson's final days, and the shocking onstage collapse of Philippe Wynne. These are not just headlines, they are human stories, pieces of a legacy that continues to resonate today. And yet, to keep this fair, let's be clear, not every detail is carved in stone. Some memories differ, some reports conflict, and some tragedies remain partly hidden in silence. That is why we say, according to reports, interviews, and public accounts. This keeps us grounded, in fact, while allowing room for discussion, debate, and interpretation. So as we move forward, remember this. What you are about to hear is a combination of verified history and reported accounts. It's a journey told with respect, with evidence, and with a promise: no fake drama, no baseless rumors. Only the truth as it has been recorded. Now, with that said, let's step into the world of the Spinners and see how one of soul music's brightest groups could carry such a tragic shadow behind their golden sound. To truly understand why the story of the Spinners is so heartbreaking, we need to go back to where it all began. Back to Detroit in 1954, when 5 young men living in the Herman Gardens housing project came together with nothing more than a dream and a shared love of music. At that time, Detroit was a city alive with rhythm. The automobile industry was booming, and Motown was just beginning to emerge as the heartbeat of soul. For teenagers like Billy Henderson, Henry Fambro, Purvis Jackson, C.P. Spencer, and James Edwards, music wasn't just a pastime. It was a lifeline, an escape from the struggles of poverty, and a chance at something greater. The original name they chose for their group was the Domingos. It sounded fresh, youthful, and carried a flair that suggested they could stand shoulder to shoulder with other vocal groups of the 1950s. But fate had other plans. James Edwards, one of the founding 5, left the group only weeks after they began. His exit could have been a fatal blow for a brand new act, but instead it became a turning point. Bobby Smith stepped in to take his place, and his smooth, versatile tenor would later become the signature voice behind many of the Spinners' greatest hits. This early change showed just how fragile the group could be, and how easily their story might have ended before it even began. By the early 1960s, the group was experimenting with labels and producers. They cut their first single, "That's What Girls Are Made For," under Harvey Fuqua's Tri-Fi Records. The song managed to reach number 27 on the charts, a promising debut, but hardly the breakout they dreamed of. Around this time, C.P. Spencer also left the group. He would go on to join other Motown-affiliated acts like the Voice Masters and later the Originals, leaving the Spinners once again vulnerable to collapse. George Dixon briefly replaced him before Edgar Chico Edwards, James Edwards' brother, took over the spot. These early years were turbulent, but they also revealed the resilience of the young group. They weren't about to let turnover or setbacks break them apart. Then came 1963, a pivotal year. Berry Gordy, the visionary founder of Motown Records, bought Tri-Fi. This move put the Spinners squarely within the Motown orbit. At first, it seemed like a blessing. They were surrounded by giants: the Temptations, the Four Tops. The Supremes and the Motown sound was dominating America. But for the Spinners, success remained elusive. Instead of receiving the full star treatment, they often found themselves relegated to support roles. They worked as chauffeurs, road managers, even shipping clerks for other Motown stars. For a group with so much talent, it was humiliating, but it also kept them hungry. In 1969, another major shift occurred. Edgar Chico Edwards left, replaced by G.C. Cameron, a singer with remarkable range. That same year, the Spinners switched to Motown's VIP subsidiary label. Under this imprint, they recorded "It's a Shame," a song co-written and produced by none other than Stevie Wonder. Released in 1970, the track soared to number 14 on the Billboard charts, giving the Spinners their first real taste of mainstream success. But just as things seemed to be turning around, another complication arrived. When their Motown contract expired, the group began working on a new project with Stevie Wonder. Unfortunately, the album was never finished, and their momentum once again seemed to stall. It was around this time that Aretha Franklin, already the Queen of Soul, stepped in with a crucial piece of advice. She told the Spinners to leave Motown, a label that had never fully invested in their potential, and to sign with Atlantic Records instead. It was advice that would change their destiny. In 1972, they officially joined Atlantic, but G.C. Cameron couldn't follow them due to contractual obligations. Instead, he introduced his cousin Philippe Wynne to take his place. That decision would define the group's golden years. With Wynne as their fiery, charismatic lead and songwriter-producer Tom Bell at the creative helm, the Spinners exploded in the 1970s. Their self-titled Atlantic debut in 1973 spawned a string of hits: "I'll Be Around," "Could It Be," "I'm Falling in Love." One-of-a-kind love affair, "Ghetto Child," and "Mighty Love." Suddenly, they weren't just survivors. They were superstars, rivaling the OJs and the Stylistics as one of the premier soul groups of the decade. Their harmonies were lush, their stage presence dazzling, and their records sold millions. But behind the hits, each member carried his own story, his own struggles. Billy Henderson, though never a lead vocalist, was known as the group's dancer, the one who lit up the stage with his energy. His role may have seemed secondary, but without him, the performances lacked their spark. Later in life, however, Billy would face money disputes with the group, even suing for unpaid royalties, a bitter fight that tarnished his legacy. He died in 2007, a victim of complications from diabetes. Henry Fambrough, the soulful baritone, was the glue that held the Spinners together. He was the only original member to remain with the group for nearly 7 decades, performing until his retirement in 2023. His voice may not have been as celebrated as Wynne's, but his presence gave the group continuity. When he passed away in February 2024, it marked the true end of the Spinners, as they were originally conceived. Purvis Jackson, the bass voice, gave the group its foundation. Known as Mr. 1245, for his booming line in "They Just Can't Stop." It Games People Play Jackson remained with the group until his death in 2008. His passing left a void no one could quite fill. Bobby Smith, who had replaced James Edwards in 1954, became one of the most important yet underappreciated members of the Spinners. His warm tenor graced hits across both the Motown and Atlantic years, often leading tracks fans mistakenly attributed to Wynne. Despite his steady presence, Bobby's final years were marked by illness. He died in 2013 from complications of lung cancer and pneumonia. And then, of course, there was Philippe Wynne. Electrifying, flamboyant, and unpredictable, Wynne took the Spinners to heights they had never imagined. But his personal demons were many. After leaving the group in 1977 to pursue a solo career, he struggled with business failures and personal tragedy. His life ended shockingly in 1984 when he suffered a fatal heart attack while performing in Oakland, California, at only 43 years old. His 2 sons later met tragic ends as well, one killed in a drive-by shooting, the other drowning while attempting a rescue. Few stories in music are as haunting, as even as the decades passed and new members joined, like John Edwards, who replaced Wynne, the tragedies kept coming. Edwards himself suffered a stroke in 2000 that ended his singing career. By the 1980s and 1990s, changing trends left the Spinners struggling to stay relevant. They became a nostalgia act beloved by loyal fans, but overshadowed by younger styles like funk disco and hip-hop. Yet, through all of this, the group endured. In 2023, just months before Henry Fambrough's passing, the Spinners were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was an honor 37 years overdue, but one that finally cemented their place in history. For fans, it was bittersweet. The recognition was glorious, but the faces that had given so much to music were now mostly gone. From the streets of Detroit in 1954 to the Hall of Fame in 2023, the Spinners' story is one of brilliance and loss of unity and fracture of music that lifted millions, even as the men who created it often fell. Each member left behind not only songs but also cautionary tales, reminders that success in the spotlight doesn't shield you from life's cruelties. And so when we look back on the Spinners, we don't just hear harmony. We hear echoes of pain, resilience, and the tragic human stories behind the music. 1950s. The birth of a dream. The story of the Spinners began in 1954 inside Detroit's Herman Gardens housing project. 5 teenagers, Billy Henderson, Henry Fambro Purvis Jackson, C.P. Spencer, and James Edwards, shared one dream to escape poverty through music. At first, they called themselves the Domingos, but destiny quickly reshaped their path. When James Edwards left just weeks into their journey, Bobby Smith stepped in as lead singer, bringing a voice that would eventually define much of their catalog. That same year, they formally became the Spinners, a name that would echo across soul music history. 1960s. Motown struggles. The early years were rough. In 1961, under Harvey Fuqua's Tri-Fi Records, they recorded That's What Girls Are Made For, which climbed to number 27 on the R&B charts. It was a promising debut, but not enough to break through. By 1963, Tri-Fi had been absorbed by Berry Gordy's Motown empire, and the Spinners suddenly found themselves surrounded by legends: the Supremes, the Temptations, the Four Tops. Yet while others were showered with hit singles and media attention, the Spinners were sidelined. They spent much of the decade working backstage, chauffeuring, managing equipment, and even packaging records for other stars. Their frustration grew, but so did their determination. In 1969, a glimmer of hope arrived. Edgar Chico Edwards exited, and G.C. Cameron joined the group. With Stevie Wonder behind the pen and the studio controls, the Spinners recorded It's a Shame, which hit number 14 in 1970. For the first time, they tasted genuine chart success. But when their Motown contract ended before a planned album with Stevie Wonder could be completed, they were once again left adrift. 1970s, the golden era. Everything changed in 1972. Aretha Franklin, already crowned the Queen of Soul, urged the group to leave Motown and sign with Atlantic Records. They took her advice, and the gamble paid off beyond their wildest dreams. G.C. Cameron could not follow due to contractual obligations, so he introduced his cousin Philippe Wynne as his replacement. With Wynne's fiery stage presence and Tom Bell's lush production, the Spinners soared. In 1973, their self-titled Atlantic debut album became a sensation. I'll Be Around. Originally, a B-side rocketed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and sold over 1 million copies. This was followed by Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, One-of-a-Kind Love Affair, Ghetto Child, and Mighty Love. Their smooth harmonies and Wynne's electrifying vocals made them one of the premier soul acts of the decade, rivaling the O'Jays and the Stylistics. But with success came controversy. In One-of-a-Kind Love Affair, listeners misheard a lyric as a curse word. Complaints poured in, forcing Atlantic to quickly edit and re-release the track. The drama only fueled their fame, and soon they had another number 1 hit with Dionne Warwick on Then Came You in 1974. Yet beneath the glitter cracks were forming. By the mid-1970s, Wynne clashed with Tom Bell and pushed to rename the group Philippe Wynne and the Spinners. His ego and ambitions strained relationships. Finally, in 1977, he left to pursue a solo career. Though John Edwards replaced him and helped sustain the group into the 1980s, the loss of Wynne's charisma marked the beginning of a slow decline. 1980s-2000s. Decline and tragedy. The 1980s were unforgiving. Though The Rubber Band Man 1976 had been a smash hit, new musical trends, disco, funk, hip-hop began to eclipse traditional soul. The Spinners still performed, but their chart dominance faded. Tom Bell, the architect of their greatest successes, moved on, leaving the group to navigate without him. Meanwhile, personal tragedies piled up. In July 1984, Philippe Wynne collapsed on stage during a nightclub performance in Oakland, California. He died the next day of a heart attack at just 43 years old. His death was a devastating blow, but his family would suffer even more. Years later, both of his sons met tragic fates, one shot and killed in a drive-by, the other drowned while attempting to save another man. The Wynne family's story became one of the darkest threads in the Spinners' history. Billy Henderson, once the group's dazzling dancer, eventually grew frustrated over financial disputes. He sued the group for unpaid royalties, a bitter battle that highlighted how often black artists of his era were underpaid and exploited. In 2007, he died of complications related to diabetes. Purvis Jackson, the deep-voiced Mr. 1245, who had anchored their harmonies for decades, passed away in 2008 after a battle with cancer. Bobby Smith, who had been with the group since the 1950s, suffered from lung cancer and pneumonia, dying in 2013 at 76. Even John Edwards Wynne's replacement was not spared. After helping the group carry on for over 20 years, he suffered a severe stroke in 2000 that forced him into retirement. By the dawn of the 21st century, nearly every original or long-standing member was either gone or silenced by illness. 2023-2024. The final chapter. Despite these losses, the Spinners' music never disappeared. They continued touring with new members, keeping their harmonies alive for loyal fans. Then in 2023, nearly 70 years after their formation, came the long-overdue recognition induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For Henry Fambro, the only original member still active, it was the culmination of a lifetime's dedication. He retired just months later, finally laying down the burden of nearly 7 decades on the road. But fate had one more twist. On February 7, 2024, Henry Fambro died at age 85. With his passing, the final original voice of the Spinners was silenced. From 5 hopeful young men in Detroit to Hall of Fame immortals, their story had come full circle. A legacy of harmony and heartbreak. Looking back, the timeline of the Spinners is as much a chronicle of American music as it is a tale of human fragility. They rose from poverty to global fame, delivered classics that still play on radios today, and endured tragedies that would have broken lesser men. Their journey was filled with soaring highs, the gold records, the sold-out concerts, the Rock Hall induction, but also devastating lows, lawsuits, illnesses, and deaths far too soon. And perhaps that is why their story resonates so deeply. Because behind every polished harmony was struggle, behind every chart-topping hit was sacrifice. The Spinners may have given us music to dance and fall in love to, but their own lives remind us how cruel the cost of fame can be. The Spinners did not exist in a vacuum. Their rise and fall were deeply shaped by a complex web of relationships. Industry giants, musical peers, producers, and family members. Understanding this network is key to understanding why their story turned so tragic. From the beginning, their association with Motown Records tied them to one of the most powerful music machines in America. Yet instead of being groomed as stars, they were relegated to the background. Chauffeurs, assistants, even shipping clerks for more favored acts. This created a quiet resentment, while the Temptations and the Four Tops climbed the charts. The Spinners watched from the sidelines. It wasn't until Stevie Wonder wrote and produced It's a Shame in 1970 that they glimpsed their potential. Stevie's involvement not only gave them credibility, it showed the power of alliances in the music world. But it was Aretha Franklin who truly shifted their destiny. Her advice to leave Motown and sign with Atlantic Records was a turning point. At Atlantic, paired with producer Tom Bell, the Spinners finally flourished. Bell's orchestrations gave them a signature sound, and his partnership with Wynne turned the group into chart toppers. Yet here, new tensions arose. Wynne's ego grew along with his fame. He reportedly pushed to rename the group Philippe Wynne and the Spinners, a move that threatened the unity of the ensemble. His ambition for personal recognition clashed with the group's identity-creating rifts that never fully healed. The Spinners also built bridges with other stars. Their duet with Dionne Warwick, "Then Came You," was a rare crossover hit that reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1974. Ironically, Warwick initially disliked the song, but Bell insisted and the gamble paid off. It was a career revival for her and another jewel for the Spinners. Likewise, Curtis Mayfield played a role in shaping John Edwards' career before he joined the Spinners, linking their legacy to yet another soul pioneer. Beyond the industry, family ties also shaped the tragedy. Philippe Wynne's life, for instance, was not only cut short by his own onstage heart attack, but shadowed by the later deaths of his two sons, one lost in a drive-by shooting, another drowned while attempting a rescue. These devastating losses rippled through the family and symbolized how the curse of tragedy seemed to follow the Spinners even beyond the stage. Money was another recurring motive. Billy Henderson's lawsuit against the group for unpaid royalties revealed the darker side of fame loyalty, fractured by disputes over finances. For artists who spent decades touring, the sense of being underpaid or exploited added bitterness to already strained relationships. Taken together, this network reveals a delicate balance of alliances, rivalries, and tragedies. The Spinners owed their success to giants like Stevie Wonder, Aretha Franklin, Tom Bell, and Dionne Warwick. Yet they were also torn apart by internal struggles for power, the hunger for individual recognition, and the cruel hand of fate within their families. Their story was not just about music. It was about how connections, both professional and personal, could lift them to unimaginable heights but also drag them into heartbreak. No legacy as long and complex as the Spinners comes without controversy, confusion, and unanswered questions. For every documented triumph, there are contradictions in memory and discrepancies in credit that spark debate among fans and historians. These cracks in the record reveal just how fragile the truth can be when told decades later. One of the biggest disputes revolves around who really sang lead on certain tracks. For example, Bobby Smith's smooth tenor carried the group through much of its early history, yet Philippe Wynne's flamboyant style often overshadowed him. Many listeners, even some critics, have mistakenly credited Wynne for songs that Smith actually sang. Shockingly, even Atlantic Records at times misprinted credits listing the wrong lead vocalist on their own albums. For die-hard fans, this misattribution feels like an injustice to Bobby Smith, whose contributions were foundational but frequently overlooked. Was this simply clerical error or a reflection of how fame tends to highlight the flashiest performer rather than the steady one? Another layer of controversy surrounds one-of-a-kind love affair. Listeners swore they heard Wynne sing a curse word in the chorus, "You just got to fuck her. Yeah," instead of the intended line, "You just got to hug her. Yeah." Radio stations received complaints prompting Atlantic to re-edit and re-release the track. But even after the correction, the debate continued. Was it a slip of the tongue? A deliberate provocation? Or merely an auditory illusion shaped by expectations? The ambiguity has never been resolved, leaving a curious footnote in their discography. Beyond music, the circumstances of Philippe Wynne's departure remain contested. Some accounts say his ego pushed him to demand the group rename itself Philippe Wynne and the Spinners, sparking irreconcilable tension. Others argue the split was more amicable, the natural result of a man who simply wanted to pursue solo fame. Still others whisper that contractual and financial disputes were the real reason. Without a definitive record, fans are left to speculate, and the debate over whether Wynne was a visionary or a disruptive force continues to this day. There are also questions about Motown's treatment of the group. Why did Berry Gordy's empire, famous for building stars out of ordinary talent, keep the Spinners on the sidelines for nearly a decade? Some argue it was a business decision. The label had too many vocal groups already competing for the spotlight. Others suggest the Spinners lacked the early charisma of the Temptations or the Supremes. But those explanations don't fully satisfy. After all, Motown eventually let them walk away, only to watch them become massive stars at Atlantic. Was this Motown's greatest oversight, or was their success simply the product of perfect timing elsewhere? Finally, there is the matter of their late induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Eligible since 1987, the Spinners weren't inducted until 2023, 36 years later. Why did it take so long for such a legendary group to be recognized? Some critics argue the Hall has long overlooked soul and R&B in favor of rock bands, while others claim the Spinners were victims of their own understated style. Whatever the reason, the delay adds a bittersweet note to their story, as most of the original members had already passed by the time the honor arrived. These disputes and gaps do not diminish. The Spinners' achievements, they deepen them. The uncertainty invites fans to take sides, to argue, and to reflect on how history is written. Were Bobby Smith's vocals underappreciated? Was Wynn a savior or a saboteur? Did Motown fail them, or did Atlantic simply give them what they always deserved? In the end, the contradictions make the Spinners more than just a soul group. They make them a subject of living debate, one whose story continues to evolve with every discussion. Every great story has a turning point, a moment when the glittering illusion shatters and the hidden darkness comes rushing in. For the Spinners, that moment came on a summer night in 1984 with Philippe Wynne at center stage. Wynne was the very image of showmanship, flamboyant suits, a dazzling smile, and a voice that could soar above the crowd and leave audiences breathless. He had helped propel the Spinners into superstardom throughout the 1970s, embodying the group's golden era. But on July 13, 1984, during a nightclub performance in Oakland, California, the spotlight turned cruel. In the middle of a song, Wynne suddenly collapsed. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act, another dramatic gesture from the charismatic frontman. But it wasn't. He had suffered a massive heart attack right there in front of fans who moments earlier were dancing and clapping to his rhythm. The scene was chaos. The band froze. The audience screamed. Wynne was rushed to the hospital, but by the next day he was gone, just 43 years old. To see a man so full of life, energy, and music cut down in the very act of performing it was a twist that stunned the music world. This wasn't just another obituary. It was a haunting reminder of how fragile the human body can be, even when cloaked in fame. But the tragedy didn't end there. For Wynne's family, the curse seemed to linger long after his death. Years later, his son Alvarez was killed in a drive-by shooting, another senseless act of violence in America's long struggle with crime. If that loss wasn't unbearable enough, fate struck again. His other son, Emmanuel, drowned in 2001 while trying to save another man from the water. Emmanuel's bravery was recognized with a Carnegie Medal, but the medal could not ease the devastation of a family already scarred by grief. Imagine that a father dies on stage in front of hundreds, his music silenced mid-song. Decades later, both of his sons, his living legacy, also meet tragic premature ends. It reads like the plot of a Greek tragedy, a cruel twist of fate that feels almost too heavy to believe. Yet it is all documented fact, each loss compounding the sorrow of the Wynne name. For the Spinners as a group, Wynne's sudden death was both symbolic and final. Though they continued with new members, the heart of their golden era had been ripped out. No replacement, however talented, could erase the memory of that collapse under the stage lights. Fans whispered about the curse of the Spinners, pointing to the string of misfortunes that seemed to follow them. Lawsuits, illnesses, early deaths. Was it mere coincidence? Or did the relentless pressure of fame create a pattern of destruction? This was the climax of their story, the moment when the audience realized that behind the harmony was heartbreak, behind the joy was unbearable loss. It was the twist no one saw coming, but one that defined the Spinners' legacy forever. With Henry Fambro's passing in 2024, the last original thread of the Spinners' story has been cut. Yet the question remains, what happens now? The group, in some form, continues to tour with newer members like Ronnie Raheem Moss and C.J. Jefferson, keeping the harmonies alive for loyal fans. But can a legacy built on the voices of Henderson, Smith, Jackson, Wynne, and Fambro truly survive without them? Some believe the Spinners' music will endure forever, safeguarded by reissues, documentaries, and tribute acts. Their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023 ensures that future generations will be reminded of their importance in shaping American soul. With streaming platforms introducing younger audiences to classics like I'll Be Around and Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, there is a strong chance that the Spinners will remain relevant long after their final curtain call. Others, however, question whether nostalgia alone can preserve their place in the cultural memory. Without the drama, personality, and authenticity of the original members, will audiences continue to connect? Or will the Spinners become another name slowly fading into the background of music history, remembered only by die-hard fans and historians? What's next may not be another chart-topping hit, but rather the ongoing conversation about their legacy. Their tragedies, their triumphs, and their harmonies live on in every debate, every cover version, every young singer inspired by their sound. The real question isn't whether the Spinners' music will survive, it's how it will be remembered. So do you think their legacy is eternal? Or is it at risk of fading with time? The story of the Spinners is one of contrasts. On stage, they were the kings of harmony, the voices that soundtracked weddings, parties, and memories across generations. Off stage, their lives were marked by lawsuits, illness, sudden deaths, and tragedies that seemed almost too heavy for one group to carry. Their journey reminds us that even the brightest stars cast shadows and that fame does not always protect against heartbreak. Yet despite the losses, their music endures. From I'll Be Around to the Rubber Band Man, their songs still echo with joy, hope, and soul. They remain woven into the fabric of American music history, proof that art outlives the artist. But as we reflect on their triumphs and their tragedies, a deeper question emerges. Were these heartbreaking endings simply personal misfortunes, or were they the inevitable result of a music industry that demands everything and often gives back so little? That's where we want to hear from you. Do you see the Spinners as victims of cruel fate, or as cautionary examples of how show business can grind even the most talented into dust? And more importantly, what do you think their legacy should mean for future generations of artists? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's debate, let's remember, and let's keep their story alive. If you found this journey powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the hidden truths of music legends. Because every song has a story, and sometimes the truth is far more dramatic than the melody.